In 1986, 15 children boarded a school bus for a field trip and were never seen again. No crash, no wreckage, no trace. But nearly 4 decades later, when a forgotten bus is found buried deep in the woods of Morning Lake, so is a survivor. And what she remembers will unravel a truth more terrifying than anyone imagined. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury and make sure no name stays forgotten. The fog had settled thick over Halstead County, like a lid no one dared lift. It clung to the pines, curled under porch lights, and silenced the sound of tires on asphalt. You could drive a whole mile and not realize you passed your own childhood. That's how memories vanished around here, quietly and without protest. It was just past 7 a.m. when the call came. Deputy Sheriff Lana Whitaker had just poured her first coffee when the dispatch crackled through. Possible discovery out by Morning Lake Pines. Construction team digging for septic tank unearth what they think is a school bus. Plates match a long closed case. Lana stood frozen in the silence of her kitchen, the mug warming her palm. Her other hand reached automatically for the notepad she always kept near the toaster, but she didn't need to write it down. She knew the case by heart. 15 children, one bus driver, vanished in 1986. They were students from Halstead Ridge Elementary, her school, her grade, her classmates. She'd been homesick that day, chickenpox. And for nearly 40 years, she'd carried that small, strange guilt like a splinter beneath her skin. She slid the untouched coffee into the sink, grabbed her keys, and left the house without locking the door. The drive to Morning Lake was quiet and slow, the fog dulling sound and stretching time. Pines rose on either side of the narrow 2-lane road, like patient sentinels. Lana passed the old ranger station, now abandoned, and turned onto the overgrown service road that had once led to the summer nature camp the kids were headed for. She remembered how excited they'd all been. The last field trip before summer break, a lake, a fire pit, and new cabins built by volunteers. She remembered the photos in the yearbook. Smiling faces pressed against the bus windows. Kids with Walkmans, cartoon backpacks, disposable cameras. She remembered them all. When she arrived, the construction crew had already cleared a perimeter. The yellow of the bus was visible in patches beneath the mud, dull, cracked, and half-crushed under the weight of years. A backhoe stood motionless beside it, like a guilty beast that had just unearthed a grave. "Ma'am," the site foreman greeted her, removing his hard hat. "We didn't touch anything once we saw what it was. You'll want to see this." Lana nodded, her throat too tight to speak. They had cleared one side of the vehicle enough to open the emergency exit door. A sour, earthy smell hung in the air, and inside was dust, mold, and the brittle decay of time. The seats were still in place. Some of the seat belts were latched. A pink lunchbox sat on the floor beneath the third row. A child's shoe lay on the back step, covered in dried moss, but no bodies. The bus was empty. That made it worse somehow. A hollow monument, a question mark buried in dirt. Lana stepped inside, her boots creaking on the warped floor. The air was stale and heavy. As she reached the front, she saw it taped to the dashboard, barely faded. A class list written in the looping, cheerful handwriting of Miss Delaney, the homeroom teacher who had vanished with them. 15 names, all ages 9 to 11. At the bottom, someone had scrolled a message in a different hand. Darker, sloppier, written over top in red marker, "We never made it to Morning Lake." Lana stepped back out of the bus. The air colder now. Somewhere behind her, a bird called out, but it sounded more like a warning than a greeting. She turned to the site foreman, her voice flat. "Seal off the area. No one touches anything else until the state team gets here." "Yes, ma'am." She looked back at the bus, framed by pines and silence. They were supposed to be gone for 2 days. Instead, they never came back. And now, after nearly 4 decades, the bus had returned without them. But someone had been here long enough to write that note. Long enough to leave behind a message. The old H. Halstead County Records building smelled of mildew and lemon cleaner. Its ceiling fans spun lazily, like they were waiting for the rest of the county to catch up. Lana stood at the counter, her fingers drumming on the wood as the clerk retrieved a case box from the archives. It had been 20 minutes since she left the bus site, but her hand still felt dirty with its dust. "Here we are," the clerk said, sliding the file forward with both hands, like it might fall apart if mishandled. "Field Trip 6B, Holstead Ridge Elementary, May 19, 1986. Sealed after 5 years, no updates." Lana nodded and carried the heavy box to one of the side desks. She opened the lid slowly, as if afraid something would leap out. Inside, photos of the children, Xeroxed class rosters, a list of personal items reportedly packed for the trip, and at the very bottom, a report stamped in red, "Missing persons, presumed lost, no evidence of foul play." That stamp had haunted the town for decades. No evidence, no foul play, no children. But Lana had always suspected there was more. Everyone had. The bus driver's name was Carl Davis, a part-time employee, recently hired, barely vetted. He had no wife, no children, and had reportedly skipped town shortly after the disappearance. He was never found either. And then there was the substitute teacher. Ms. Delaney was sick that week. In her place, M. Atwell, a woman no one remembered hiring. The records listed her address, but it was now an overgrown lot on the edge of town. She'd never been seen again either. Lana leaned back in her chair, staring at the photocopied class photo. She still remembered their names, their laughter in the halls, their little backpacks swinging as they raced toward the yellow bus in the parking lot. She traced a finger over one face in particular, Nora Kelly. Wide green eyes, a missing tooth, and a pink ribbon tied in her hair. Nora had lived 2 houses down from Lana back then. They had shared popsicles on the curb every summer. The photo made Lana's chest ache until a knock snapped her back into the present. Deputy Harris stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "Sheriff, you need to see this." They were at the hospital 15 minutes later. A woman had been found by a fishing couple half a mile from the dig site. She was barefoot, dressed in tattered clothes that didn't match any local brands. She was dehydrated, malnourished, and barely conscious, but she was alive. The nurse stopped Lana outside the exam room. "She's stable, no ID, mid-30s. Keeps saying she's 12 years old. We thought it was trauma until she gave us her name." The nurse handed Lana a clipboard scrolled across the top in trembling handwriting, "Nora Kelly." Lana's knees nearly buckled. "She says she was on a school field trip," the nurse added gently, "and that she's been trying to get home ever since." The woman inside the room sat up slowly when Lana entered. Her hair was long, tangled, her face drawn and pale. But the eyes, they were unmistakable. Green, wide. Lana stopped at the foot of the bed. "Nora," the woman blinked, her eyes welled up. "You got old," she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. Lana felt her throat close. You remember me?" Nora nodded. "You had chickenpox. You were supposed to come, too." Tears burned in Lana's eyes. She walked slowly to the chair beside the bed and sat, too stunned to speak. "They told me no one would remember." Nora whispered. "That no one would come." "Who told you that?" Lana asked gently. Nora looked past her, out the window. Then she turned back, voice a whisper. "We never made it to Morning Lake." The sun had dipped behind the trees by the time Lana drove back to the sheriff's office. The golden hour light filtered through the blinds, casting long stripes across her desk. She didn't sit down. Instead, she stood staring at the whiteboard she had cleared that morning. It now held 15 names tacked up in 2 neat columns. Above them in red marker, "Morning Lake Field Trip, May 19, '86. Below, a new heading, Nora Kelly, survived, returned. She circled Nora's name, then added, found May 5, 2025 near Morning Lake site. Appears to have aged normally. Believes she's 12 years old. No memory of events after the bus left school. Repeats the phrase, we never made it to Morning Lake. Lana exhaled slowly. Something didn't make sense. If Nora had been alive all this time, where had she been? And what about the others? By 9 p.m., she was back at the hospital. The doctors had run basic evaluations. No signs of injury beyond sun exposure, dehydration, and psychological trauma. Her DNA was being processed, but Lana didn't need the test. It was her. She was sure. Nora had been moved to a quieter wing. When Lana entered, she found her curled beneath a blanket, staring at a small paper cup of water on the tray. Hi again, Lana said softly. Nora looked up. Her face still held the gaunt fragility of someone too long away from the world, but her voice was clearer. You believe me, don't you? I do, Lana said. Nora gave a sad smile. Most don't. Lana took a seat. Can I ask you something? Nora nodded. Do you remember the bus ride? Nora looked down. Only the beginning. The driver didn't talk much. He wasn't our usual guy. And there was someone else, a man waiting by the fork in the road. Lana leaned forward. Do you remember what he looked like? Not really. I think he had a beard. I just remember what he said. What was that? Nora's voice dropped to a whisper. He said the lake wasn't ready for us yet. That we'd have to wait. Lana felt the chill crawl up her arms. He got on the bus, Nora said. And then I don't know. I woke up in a barn, but it wasn't a barn anymore. It was like a home, but the windows were covered and the clocks were all wrong. What do you mean? They always said it was Tuesday, even when it wasn't. They wouldn't let us talk about before. We had to use new names. Lana tried to keep her face neutral. Who's they? Nora swallowed. There were two of them at first. A woman and the man. She called him Mr. Avery. I don't know if it was his real name. She disappeared after a few months. I think she got sick. Do you know where the barn was? Nora shook her head. They moved us around, sometimes in vans. We weren't allowed to look outside. They said people had forgotten about us. That it was better this way. Lana sat in stunned silence. Some of the others, they forgot about school, about home, Nora said. But I didn't. I never did. Lana reached into her coat pocket and slid something onto the tray. A faded yearbook photo. Nora picked it up and stared. That's me, she whispered. And that's Caleb and Marcy. And she stopped, her eyes filling with tears. You kept this? Lana nodded. I never stopped. Nora clutched the photo to her chest. Later that night, Lana sat alone in her truck parked outside the old H. Halstead barn on County Line Road. She'd remembered something from Nora's description about the clocks, the way the windows were boarded. This barn had belonged to a man named Frank Avery. He died in 2003, but he had a son named Martin Avery. Last known address, unknown. Lana stepped out of the truck and stared at the silhouette of the barn in the moonlight. The wind rustled the grass. A loose door creaked softly. She moved toward the side of the building, her flashlight casting long shadows across the dry wood. Something glinted near the base of the barn wall. Metal. She crouched and found it. A small bracelet tangled in the weeds. She picked it up. Plastic, faded purple, etched with a child's name in blocky handwriting, Kimi. Lana's breath caught. Kim Leong, one of the 15, a quiet, artistic girl who loved cartoons and wrote her name on everything. Lana stood slowly, her heart pounding. The past wasn't just whispering anymore. It was screaming. The bracelet was still in Lana's hand when she returned to the station just after midnight. She didn't turn on the overhead lights, just the lamp on her desk, casting a pool of amber across the surface. The rest of the office remained quiet and still. She placed the bracelet beside the class photo, lining it up with the face of Kim Lung. She'd been 10 years old, wore glasses, loved dinosaurs, and now this. Found beside a barn linked to a man with no current address. Lana picked up the landline and dialed the Texas Missing and Unsolved Cold Case Unit. She left a detailed message requesting a full report on Martin Avery and his last known associates. She didn't expect an answer until morning. But something was happening now, and she couldn't sleep with ghosts pressing in at the windows. By sunrise, the Morning Lake dig site was buzzing with quiet urgency. More of the earth around the buried bus had been cleared, and a second team from the state's Historical Preservation Unit had arrived to document the excavation, less because of its history, and more because of what it now represented. Lana stood beside the emergency exit, arms folded, watching the forensic techs catalog every inch of the hollowed shell. She had barely slept. Her mind was too loud with memory and unease. "Sheriff," one of the investigators called, lifting a sealed evidence sleeve. "You're going to want to see this." She walked over. The tech, a man in his late 40s with square glasses and a quiet voice, held the plastic pouch carefully. Inside was a photograph. Color slightly curled at the edges, but not aged like it should have been. Lana frowned. Where was it? Wedged behind the metal paneling above the back left window. Looked recently placed, honestly. She took the photo and studied it. It showed a group of children, maybe 8 or 9 of them, standing in front of what looked like a low wooden building, a barn, a lodge. It was hard to tell. The siding was weathered. The windows boarded. The kids' expressions were strange, blank, not frightened, not smiling, just absent. A few of the faces were unmistakable. Marcy, Kimmy, Caleb, and there in the center, Nora. Her green eyes wide but vacant. But Lana's stomach dropped as she noticed something else. Behind the children, barely visible in the shadows of the doorway, was a man, tall, bearded, his face mostly obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. She flipped the photo over. There was writing on the back, "The Chosen, Year 2. No date, no location, just those words. Back at the station, Lana laid the photo beside the ghost notebook and her growing collection of names and fragments. Year 2. That meant they had been held for longer than she dared imagine. She opened a county map and began cross-referencing all Avery-owned properties, abandoned buildings, and old religious sites in the area. One caught her eye. Riverview Camp, an old summer retreat for children, purchased in 1984 by a private family trust. The land records had been scrubbed. The property had remained off-grid since the early 90s. It sat at the edge of the National Forest, 30 miles from the bus site. Lana circled it in red ink. That afternoon, she brought the photo to Nora. The moment the image touched her hands, Nora gasped. Her fingers trembled. "This was after the first winter," she said softly. "We were made to pose once a season to show progress." She looked up, tears forming in her eyes. "That building? It's where they kept us the longest. Do you know where it is?" Nora shook her head slowly. "We weren't allowed outside without blindfolds, but I remember sounds. A river, a whistle at sunset, and the air. It always smelled like burning pine." Lana's mind clicked into gear. Riverview Camp was named for its proximity to a river bend. And there had once been a logging train that passed through that region. Its whistle used to echo for miles at dusk. "Do you recognize this man?" Lana asked, pointing to the shadowed figure in the photo. Nora hesitated. "That's not Mr. Avery," she whispered. "That's someone worse." "Worse?" "They called him Father Elijah, but he wasn't a priest." He just liked the sound of it. Lana felt a chill work up her spine. What happened to him? Nora stared at the photo. I don't know. He just stopped coming one day after year 3. Then we were moved again. Different place, different rules. Some didn't make it. Some. She broke off, her voice cracking. Some forgot their own names. Lana placed a gentle hand on Nora's. You didn't forget, she said. You came back. Nora gave a fragile nod. But they're still out there. Some of them. I feel it. The others. She looked Lana directly in the eyes. They don't want to be found. That night, Lana drove north toward Riverview Camp. The road narrowed to gravel and the trees thickened like walls. Fog gathered low on the ground, curling between roots and old fence posts. Her headlights caught a faded wooden sign half swallowed by vines, Riverview Youth Retreat. Private land. She parked at the edge of the old property line and stepped out. The silence was absolute. No birds, no rustling wind, just the low hiss of distant water. Maybe a river. Lana took a flashlight and followed the overgrown path. Halfway down the trail, she saw it. The building from the photo. Its roof sagged. The porch was rotted through, but the walls were the same. Wooden siding blackened at the corners. The windows were boarded from the inside. She approached slowly. Just before stepping onto the porch, she froze. In the dirt, fresh footprints, small ones, a child's. Lana reached for her gun, her voice low, cautious. Hello, anyone here? Silence. Then from somewhere inside, the soft creak of floorboards and a whisper, a child's voice, just audible in the dark. You're not supposed to be here. Lana's hand gripped the flashlight tighter as she stepped slowly onto the warped porch. The wood groaned under her weight. Another whisper echoed from inside, low, almost playful. She came anyway. The door was cracked open. Just a sliver. No recent signs of forced entry. No new locks or chains. But the smell, earthy and metallic, drifted out, like the air hadn't moved in years. Lana nudged the door with her foot. It opened with a long creak. Her beam swept across the room, bare walls, dust-choked air, the skeletal remains of furniture long since abandoned. But what caught her eye first was what had been carved into the far wall. Words, children's names, some scratched shallow, as if rushed, others carved deep, angrily, again and again, like someone was trying not to forget. Kimmy, Marcy, Elijah crossed out. Caleb, Sam, question mark beside it. J.N., Nora, Nora, Nora. 3 times, one below the other. Lana swallowed hard. This wasn't just a hiding place. It had been a prison. She stepped forward, her boots stirring the dust. The wood beneath her creaked, but held. She passed what had once been a table, now splintered and tipped against a wall. There was something beneath it. She crouched. A box, metal, rusted at the edges, but intact. She pried it open slowly. Inside were papers, yellowed and damp, but on top, a thin stack of Polaroids bound by a rubber band. She lifted them out. Children again, but not posed this time. These were candid, taken from angles that made them feel wrong. Some were sleeping, some eating. One was crying in the corner of a narrow windowless room. Each photo had a name written on the back, but not their real names. Dove, Glory, Silence, Obedience. The last photo was different. A child standing alone by a tree. Her face turned away, but her left arm was visible, and Lana saw what she was meant to. A bracelet, purple plastic, the same kind she had found near the barn. Kimmy. She flipped the photo. Disobeyed. Suddenly, a soft creak behind her. Lana stood quickly, flashlight darting across the room. Hello, she called out. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here to help. Silence, and then softly from the second floor above, you're not like them. Lana turned toward the staircase, old and brittle, but still holding. Slowly she climbed each step, her breath shallow, hand hovering near her sidearm. At the top landing, she paused. One of the doors at the end of the hall was slightly open, a faint flicker of candlelight visible through the gap. She moved toward it. Inside, the air was warmer. Someone had been here. The walls were covered in children's drawings, charcoal and pencil, crude but deliberate. She scanned them, heart thudding. One drawing showed a line of children walking in the woods. Another, a man with no face, arms stretched wide like wings. A third showed a school bus in flames. And on the ground below it, a row of small, identical headstones. Lana stepped back, dizzy. Her light shook in her hand. Then she heard it again. That voice, quiet and close. They told us not to draw, but we did anyway. She turned, and there he was, a boy, no older than 10, standing barefoot in the doorway, eyes dark, hair shaggy, pale, thin, dirt smudged across his cheek. Who are you? Lana asked, gently lowering the flashlight. The boy didn't answer right away. They called me Jonah, but that wasn't my name. Lana crouched, her voice steady. Do you remember your real name? He hesitated, then shook his head. They took it. She nodded slowly. It's okay. You don't have to remember it right now. Are you here to take me away? I'm here to help, Lana said softly. Are you alone? Jonah looked at the floor. No. He pointed behind her toward the wall behind the old metal bunk beds. Lana stood and followed his gaze. There, etched faintly into the floorboards, nearly covered by dust, were more names. But these weren't carved by hand. They had been burned into the wood. With heat or time or something she couldn't quite explain. The wood around them was scorched. And beneath them, in black ink, was written, names we must not forget. There were 12 names. 3 were circled, and the rest were crossed out. Lana sat with Jonah in the back of her SUV. The boy, wrapped in a heavy blanket, silent except for the soft rustle of the emergency thermal foil crinkling with each movement. His eyes, gray, distant, and far older than any 10-year-old's, stared out the window, as if waiting for something to leap from the trees. They hadn't spoken much on the drive back. He hadn't asked where they were going. He hadn't asked why she had come. Only one thing seemed to matter to him. Are the others coming back, too? Lana hadn't answered because she didn't know. At the station, she gently ushered him into the back office, one she rarely used, and pulled the blinds shut. A local social worker was on her way, but Lana had insisted on being the one to talk to him first. She brought him a juice box, an old wool hoodie, and a set of photos she printed from the original yearbook, laminated and faded from time. Jonah sat with the photos in his lap. He traced a small finger over each face. I remember her, he whispered. That's Marcy. Then he tapped another. And him. Sam, he always got in trouble. He wasn't good at staying quiet. He pointed to one more, Lana's own childhood face. You were supposed to come. She smiled faintly. I was, but I got sick. Jonah tilted his head. That's lucky. Meanwhile, across town, the forensics team called in a discovery. They had found another photo buried beneath the rear floor panel of the bus. This one partially burned. It showed 4 children seated around a campfire. One of them, facing the camera directly, had dark skin and short hair. In the bottom corner, written in marker, he stayed. He chose to stay. Lana stared at the photo. Something tugged at the edge of her memory. She pulled up the old roster again, mentally reviewing each name until she paused at one. Aaron Devlin, age 11 at the time of the trip. Quiet, bright, a gifted chess player, always reading books far beyond his grade. She checked the county database. There was an A. Devlin listed in the town's electrical department. Age 49. No high school record on file prior to 1990. Moved into Holstead in 2004. Lived alone in a trailer outside of town. No listed next of kin. Lana stood slowly. She didn't believe in coincidences anymore. The trailer was perched at the edge of a gravel lot, half buried by pine needles, the door rusting at the hinges. A single bulb above the porch flickered faintly as Lana pulled up. She knocked once. No answer. She knocked again. This time a voice answered. Low, calm. I knew someone would come eventually. The door opened. The man who stood there looked older than his years. Gray streaks at the temples, eyes sharp and unreadable. He wore a simple shirt, flannel jacket, and work jeans. But there was something about the way he stood. Still, like someone waiting for judgment. Aaron Devlin? Lana asked. He didn't respond right away, then nodded once. I remember you, he said softly. You used to wear braids and a jean jacket with patches. Lana blinked. You remember me? We were in the same class. You had a green backpack with a silver zipper that always got stuck. Her heart skipped. Why didn't you come forward? Aaron stepped aside. Because not everyone wanted to leave. Inside the trailer was meticulously clean, sparse. A chessboard sat on a small coffee table. Bookshelves lined the walls, everyone filled with books on psychology, memory, and group behavior. I left the sanctuary in 1991, Aaron said, sitting carefully on the edge of the couch. I was 16. They let me go. Let you? I was the one who stayed when others tried to escape. The one who helped them keep order. I believed in it for a long time. I thought it was safe there. Lana sat across from him, listening. But then things changed, he continued. After year 4, the group splintered. Elijah disappeared. The others began to rebel. Marcy ran. Caleb tried to fight back. I stayed. Not because I agreed, but because I was afraid of the outside. Lana's voice was steady. You could have helped find them. I was told the world had forgotten us, that our families had moved on. His voice broke slightly. When I finally left, I didn't know how to be anything other than quiet. He looked at her. But if you're here now, someone else must have come back. Lana nodded. Nora. Aaron's eyes flickered. She remembered, he whispered. After all this time, she never forgot. Aaron looked away toward the window, where dusk was just beginning to touch the treetops. I know where the others might be, he said. At least where they were sent after the fires. Fires? Aaron's hands clenched. There was an uprising. Some of the kids, older by then. They set part of the sanctuary ablaze. The group scattered. The younger ones were moved, split up, hidden under new names. He stood. They buried the truth in the woods. But I can take you there. That night, Lana met Nora in her hospital room and showed her the photo of the boy at the fire. Her breath caught. She stared at it like she was seeing a ghost. He stayed behind, she whispered. We thought he was gone, but he stayed, and they listened to him. She looked up. Do you think he remembers us? Lana nodded slowly. He remembers everything. The forest felt different now, not wild or free, but watchful, as though it remembered what had been done here. The leaves rustled, but the air was still. Each step Lana took on the narrow trail behind Aaron Devlin stirred the silence like dust. He hadn't said a word in the last mile, only walked with a quiet urgency, hands in the pockets of his jacket, eyes never straying from the path. Nora hadn't come, her body too weak, her memories too raw. But Lana had promised to go, to see what was left and to try to find who wasn't. They reached a small clearing just after noon. Surrounded by towering pines, a half-collapsed structure leaned against the hillside. The roof had caved in. Vines twisted up through the wooden frame, like nature was trying to reclaim what man had hidden. This was the original sanctuary, Aaron said quietly. The first site, the place we were taken after the bus was diverted. It used to be bigger. There were 4 cabins, a lodge, and 2 underground cells. Lana paused. Cells? He nodded slowly. They called them reflection rooms, but they were just pits. No light, no noise. Just the sound of your own thoughts until they stopped making sense. Lana's stomach turned. They put kids in there. Marcy, Kimmy, Nora once, for saying the word school. I let it happen. His voice cracked. I didn't stop it. I believed it was the only way we'd survive. Lana took a deep breath and stepped into the ruins. Inside, the smell of mildew and ash lingered faintly. Scorched floorboards, broken furniture. But in one corner, shielded beneath the collapsed beam, was something intact. A set of 3 small lockers, rusted but still upright. Aaron joined her. These were ours, he said. They made us keep only what they gave us. Blank books, uniforms, 1 spoon. But some of us hid pieces of who we used to be. Lana pulled open the first locker, empty. The second, barely ajar, held only a torn shoe and a melted crayon. But the third, something was there. A bundle wrapped in cloth. She carefully lifted it out and opened it. Inside, a cracked cassette player, a child's bracelet, and a drawing carefully preserved in plastic. It showed a girl standing on a hill beneath a full moon. She wore a red ribbon, and in her hand was a sign. 3 words were written on it, "We are still here." Lana knelt, the drawing in her lap. It wasn't just a plea. It was a declaration. Aaron crouched beside her. Nora drew that. I remember the day before she ran. You said they scattered the others, Lana whispered. Where? He pointed toward the ridge behind the old sanctuary. There's a second trail hidden. That's where they moved the younger ones when the fire came. They didn't call it sanctuary anymore. What did they call it? Aaron's eyes darkened. Haven. 2 hours later, Lana stood at the crest of the ridge. The sun was beginning to dip low, sending long beams through the trees. Ahead, partially camouflaged by moss and age, stood a concrete structure built into the hillside. There were no signs, no markings, no path, only a steel door rusted at the hinges. Aaron approached it slowly. This was where they took the ones too young to question, or the ones too broken to resist. It was quieter here, colder. They didn't teach anymore, just observed. Observed? They'd call it watching the fruit ripen. I didn't understand what they meant at the time, but it was about control, about waiting. For what? Lana asked. Aaron looked away. For obedience, for full forgetting. He placed his palm on the cold metal. There's a room inside, sealed last I saw. They called it the garden. No lights, just voices. They made some of us stay in there until we stopped asking to leave. Lana shivered. And what happened to the ones who didn't stop asking? He didn't answer. They pried open the door with an emergency jack from Lana's truck. The air inside was damp and still. Her flashlight beam swept across cement floors, water-stained walls, and broken furniture. Scratches lined the walls, names, symbols, short messages etched with fingernails, keys, or worse. But what stopped Lana cold was a small door to the right. A plaque hung crookedly above it. The only word on it, garden. She turned to Aaron. He nodded slowly. Some of them are still alive, Sheriff, he said quietly. I don't know where, but I know it in my bones. He stepped back, his voice a whisper. Because I hear them in my dreams, calling each other by the names they weren't supposed to say. Back at the hospital, Nora awoke just after midnight, heart pounding, breath shallow. The fluorescent lights flickered gently overhead. A nurse entered, startled by her expression. "You okay, sweetie?" Nora stared at her. "I had a dream," she whispered. "But it wasn't mine." The nurse leaned closer. "There was a room," Nora continued. "No light, cold walls, and someone whispering." She swallowed hard. "They were saying my name." The garden wasn't a room. It was a void. Lana stood just inside the threshold, her flashlight beam trembling as it pierced the heavy dark. The walls were close, the ceiling low, and the air, thick and unmoving, felt as though it hadn't been breathed in decades. No furniture, no windows, just concrete. But the smell, that same faint mix of damp earth, old metal, and something else, something fainter, almost sweet, made Lana pause. Behind her, Aaron remained outside the doorway, refusing to come in. He had said the children weren't just kept here. They were retrained here, made to sit in silence for hours, told to whisper prayers that weren't prayers, taught to forget the sound of their own names. Lana scanned the room. The walls were covered in marks. Not just names this time, but tallies. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Each one scratched in sequence, counting something. Time, days, punishments. In the far corner, her beam caught the edge of something buried beneath dust and broken plaster. She knelt carefully and brushed it free. A small recorder, the kind used by journalists or investigators, battered, the tape inside nearly disintegrated. She flipped it over, etched into the plastic with a pin or nail, for the ones who remember. She slipped it into an evidence bag, her hand suddenly unsteady. Because this wasn't some relic left behind for curiosity. It was a message. Someone had wanted to be heard. At the station, Lana called in the tech team to carefully restore the cassette. It took hours, but by early evening, the tape was ready to play just once. It was too fragile for repeated runs. She asked to be alone when they played it back. The lights were low. The rain had started tapping against the station windows. She pressed play. Static. Then a voice. Small. Weak. "This is Nora. I think. I don't know anymore. It's dark. I can't tell how long I've been here, but I think I remember school. I think I had a brother." Lana sat forward. "They don't let us say real names. They say that's how the world finds you. But I write them anyway. Even if it's just in my head." A long pause. "If anyone finds this, don't believe them when they say we ran away. We didn't. We were taken. We were made into something else." Another pause. "But I'm not gone. Not yet." The tape clicked. Lana sat in the silence. Pulse racing. The tape was old. The voice wasn't Nora's. The voice was younger, more hesitant, but unmistakably Kimmy Lung. That night, she brought the recorder to Nora at the hospital. When she played the tape, Nora covered her mouth. "I remember this," she whispered. She used to practice her voice, like she wanted someone to hear it the right way someday. She was trying to hold on. Lana said gently. Nora nodded. She never gave up. Even when the others started to fade. She reached for the tape, then stopped. "She's alive," she said quietly. "I don't know how I know that, but I do." Lana didn't argue because the voice hadn't sounded like someone at the end. It had sounded like someone waiting. The next day, Aaron handed Lana a map hand-drawn from memory. He pointed to a spot near the far end of the woods, just beyond the second ridge. There was a hatch hidden in the roots of a tree that had been split by lightning. They used it when they wanted to move people without being seen. You think it's still there? If they were smart, Aaron said, and they were. Hours later, Lana and a team hiked into the dense forest. The sky was overcast, the branches thick overhead. Every snapped twig underfoot echoed like a warning. They found the tree, a tall cedar hollowed near the base, its trunk cleaved decades ago and blackened on one side. Lightning split. Beneath its roots, carefully concealed behind brush and loose stone, was a rusted metal hatch. They forced it open. A narrow tunnel descended into the earth. Cold air poured out like a sigh. Lana led the way down the old ladder. What they found below was not just a tunnel but a network. Hallways, rooms, bunks, crates, all abandoned but too intact for comfort. And then they reached a door, worn, wood-lined but sealed tight. She knocked once, silence. Then from behind the door, something scraped. A footstep. Lana pressed her ear to the wood and heard it. A voice. Small, cautious. Is it finally okay to speak again? Lana stood frozen in the tunnel, her breath held tight in her chest. The voice behind the door had been small, raspy, and full of something that hit her harder than fear. Hope. She stepped forward and knocked again. Hello, my name is Lana. I'm a sheriff. You're safe now. Another silence. Then, they said we couldn't leave until someone remembered us. Lana signaled to the deputy behind her to help unseal the door. The hinges shrieked as they pried it open with crowbars. Dust poured out in thick clouds. The air was stale, unmoved for decades. Inside, the light from Lana's flashlight landed on a figure, hunched, thin, wrapped in layered clothes and tattered blankets. A girl, but not a child. A woman, maybe late 30s, maybe 40, eyes wide, hair matted, skin pale and translucent from years without sunlight. She blinked and shielded her face. Too bright, she whispered. Too fast. Lana crouched carefully. What's your name? The woman trembled, clutching something close to her chest. A leather-bound notebook, edges cracked with time. They called me Silence, she said. But that wasn't mine. Do you remember your real name? She stared for a long moment, then whispered, Kimmy. Kimmy Lang. Lana's throat tightened. The girl in the Polaroids. The name on the bracelet. The voice on the tape. And now alive. Back at the hospital, doctors worked in silence. Kimmy barely spoke during the initial evaluation. Her responses were slow, careful, like she wasn't sure the world around her was real. Nora sat across from her in the quiet recovery room, watching through tear-filled eyes. You remember me? She asked softly. Kimmy turned her head. Her lips parted. You had the red ribbon, she whispered. Nora smiled through the ache. You used to braid it for me. Kimmy reached out, hesitated, then placed the notebook on the bed between them. They made me keep records. They thought I was obedient, but I wrote the truth, too. In the margins, in code, like we used to do in math class. Lana took the journal carefully and opened to the first page. It looked like sermon notes, passages and reflections, scribbled verses, mantras of the cult. But in the corners of the page, numbers, shapes, dates, and names. So many names. Caleb, taken from Sanctuary, 1988, did not return. Marcy escaped during fire. Believed dead, not confirmed. Sam, broken hatch, no recovery. Jonah, obedient, transferred. Nora, punished, erased memory withheld. Me, waiting. Each entry grew darker, more fractured until the final one, if someone finds this, don't just take us back. Take us forward. Help us become real again. That night, Lana sat with the journal in her lap, flipping through the pages. Each was a map of survival, of resistance, of a child growing into a woman in the shadows, and of a system that was designed to erase every trace of what these children once were. But Kimmy hadn't forgotten, and neither had Nora. And Aaron, too, despite everything, had led them here, the last survivors. But were they the only ones? The following morning, Aaron stood beside Lana at the ridge, staring down into the woods below. The records mentioned a second tunnel, Lana said. One that was never found. Aaron nodded. The older kid spoke of it like a myth, a way out. But I think it wasn't an escape route. Lana looked at him. Then what? A hiding place. For what? Aaron turned to her. For the ones they never wanted the world to know existed. Back at the hospital, Kimmy woke in the early light. Nora had fallen asleep in the chair beside her, hand resting on the bed's edge. Kimmy turned her face toward the window. Outside, morning was breaking. She hadn't seen a sunrise in almost 30 years. Her voice, when it came, was barely a breath. It's not over yet. The final tunnel wasn't marked on any map, but Kimmy's journal held the key. Buried in coded margins and scattered through false verses, Lana pieced together the meaning. 3 stone trees, a stream that split but never rejoined, and a red X drawn over a hollow curve at the bend of the river. Aaron had told her once that the forest north of Morning Lake was riddled with sinkholes, some natural, others man-made. Lana followed the map at dawn. The riverbed was low from the dry season, revealing dark limestone and twisted roots. Birds chirped overhead, but the woods felt hushed, as if holding their breath. Lana crossed over slippery rocks until she found them. 3 large petrified trees clustered together on a ridge. She stood between them and looked down. The river split here, once flowing wide, but now diverted into 2 narrow forks, one veering off into stone. And there, just as drawn in the journal, a depression in the ground, almost circular, covered in moss and branches. Lana cleared them gently. Beneath was a steel hatch, fused with age but still intact. A faint engraving at the edge, worn nearly smooth, TS2, Transfer Station 2. Her fingers traced the metal. Her voice low and steady, for the ones they never wanted the world to find. With backup a few minutes behind her, Lana forced the hatch open. A rush of cold air poured out, dry and bitter, tinged with mildew and something faintly metallic. The shaft was narrow, reinforced with concrete, and sloped downward for nearly 20 feet before flattening into a narrow corridor. Her boots echoed as she stepped into the past. The air was still, too. What she found inside was not a prison. Not exactly. It was a preservation. 10 rooms, each no larger than a walk-in closet. Some contained beds, others only mats. A few had drawings on the wall, crude stick figures holding hands, suns with sharp rays, the outline of a bus disappearing over a hill, but there were no children, only remnants. She entered a central room, larger, domed at the ceiling. There, arranged in a tight circle, were 15 small desks, all facing inward. Each one had a nameplate. Some Lana recognized, some she didn't. At the center of the circle, beneath the dusty glass dome, was a locked case. Inside it, a book. Lana broke the glass gently and retrieved it. The cover was plain black, worn leather, but when she opened it, her breath caught. The final curriculum. Inside were typed lessons, handwritten notes, and margins filled with erratic scribbles. Words repeated over and over: obedience is safety. Memory is danger. The past is the infection. The future is correction. Each page grew more unstable. Notes scrolled by different hands. Some childlike, others firm. A name repeated on page after page, Kasia, then crossed out, then written again. On the very last page, Kasia did not forget. Kasia ran. Kasia saw what they did in room 6. Room 6 is sealed. Lana turned to her radio. Requesting search team. Possible hidden chamber off main structure. Look for room 6. Static. Then, copy that. They found room 6 behind a false wall. Its door bricked over, sealed in concrete. It took hours, but when they finally breached it, the air hit them like a wave of time gone wrong. Inside were no beds, no windows, just photographs, hundreds of them, children in uniforms, children kneeling, children standing in rows with blank faces. And then in the center of the far wall, a mural painted by hand. It showed a girl running through trees, her arms outstretched, her face turned upward toward the light, the words painted beneath, Kasia remembered, she left the light on for us. Back at the hospital, Kimmy sat upright as Lana laid the photo from room 6 before her. Tears welled. That was her, she whispered. Kasia. She was older than us. Quiet. She never joined the chants. They said she disappeared during year 3. Did she escape? Lana asked. Kimmy shook her head. She wasn't trying to escape. She looked up. She was trying to leave a door open. That night, Lana stood at the edge of Morning Lake. The stars shimmered across the surface. 15 children were taken. 3 had returned, but now there was evidence that others had survived, if only for a while. The final journal entries, the mural, the tape, all of it pointed to one unthinkable truth. Some of the missing never died. They simply disappeared into a place the world was never meant to see. And at least one of them, Kasia, had fought to be remembered. The mural haunted Lana. The face of the girl, Kasia, painted in swirls of blue and gold, arms outstretched as if trying to fly. She was older than the others in the photos, maybe 14, maybe 15. Her presence in the sealed room suggested something different about her. Kasia hadn't been a victim. She had been a witness, maybe even a whistleblower. Lana returned to the station and reopened a forgotten file, State Ward Transfers 1991 to 1993. Dozens of unnamed children relocated after the collapse of 2 unlicensed group homes in Northern California. All with scrubbed medical records and redacted intake forms. One entry stood out. A girl, age estimated between 13 and 15, brought in with no memory of her name, placed in temporary care, described as emotionally disconnected but physically healthy. She refused to speak during her first year. Her given name upon intake, Jane Doe, number 19, later renamed Maya Ellison. Adopted in 1994 by a couple in Morning Lake. Lana leaned back in her chair. Her heart was racing. Kasia didn't disappear. Kasia became Maya. Maya Ellison ran the bookstore in town. Quiet, kind, early 40s. Known for her soft voice and obsessive memory, able to recall customers' reading preferences from years prior. Lana had spoken to her dozens of times, borrowed books, asked about local history. Not once had she suspected a thing. She drove straight to the shop. Maya stood behind the counter, shelving a stack of second-hand paperbacks. Her hair was pinned in a loose bun, glasses perched on her nose. When she looked up and saw Lana, she smiled politely. "Sheriff, mystery section's been busy this week." Lana stepped closer, her voice soft. "Maya, do you know who Kasia is?" The woman froze. Slowly, her eyes met Lana's. For a moment, just a flicker, recognition. Then, no. "Should I?" Lana placed the photograph on the counter, the mural, the girl running. Maya's hands began to tremble. Lana waited. I used to dream about her," Maya said quietly. "I thought she was made up. A story I told myself. She would say things I didn't understand. About names, about tunnels, about forgetting." Her voice broke. "I thought it was trauma from someone else's life. I never believed it was mine." Lana laid her hand gently over Maya's. "It was yours. You didn't just survive. You tried to leave a light on." Maya pressed her fingers to her lips. Tears filled her eyes. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "They told us if we left, no one would believe us. That the world didn't want us." "They were wrong," Lana said. "You were found." Later that night, Lana brought Maya to meet Kimmy. The moment the door opened, Kimmy stood upright. The two women stared at each other, one frozen in the past, the other having built a life outside of it. Then Kimmy whispered, "Kasia." And Maya whispered back, "Kimmy." They embraced slowly at first, then fiercely. Tears fell, but no one said much. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was proof they had endured. Aaron visited the next morning. He stood at the edge of the hospital room, unsure if he was welcome. Kimmy nodded to him. "You're the reason they weren't all forgotten," she said. "You stayed." "I was too afraid to leave," he replied. Maya looked at him carefully. "Maybe, but fear kept us alive." Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a photo, one the investigators had recovered from room 6, but hadn't known how to identify. It showed a group of older children standing near the base of a tree. One boy in particular stood slightly apart from the rest, eyes down, shoulders stiff. Aaron stared. "I thought they burned that," he whispered. "You remembered your name," Maya said. "That's more than most." By the week's end, Lana gathered everything. The journals, the photos, the mural replica, the taped confessions, the recovered belongings. She filed an official report titled, "The Morning Lake 15, a case reopened." It would take months, maybe years, for the full truth to come out. The state would investigate what was missed. Families would come forward. Some might sue, some would mourn, but others, like Nora, Kimmy, and Maya, had a different goal. They wanted to start a foundation for lost children, for the unheard, for those who had their names taken, but found them again. On a warm spring morning, Lana returned to the lake. The sun sparkled on the surface. Ducks passed silently across the water. A small wooden sign now stood at the edge of the dock. It read, "In memory of the missing, to those who waited in silence, your names are remembered." She knelt and placed a Polaroid beneath the sign, the one from the old mural, the girl running toward the light. And then she stood because there were others out there. And maybe, just maybe, some of them were still waiting. 3 months later, the town of Morning Lake was quiet again. Tourists came and went. The school reopened. The missing children's case made national headlines. And behind all the noise, the town slowly began to breathe again. But for those who had lived it, the wounds hadn't fully healed. Not yet. Nora was the first to leave. She moved to Seattle, started taking classes, and began painting again, something she hadn't done since she was a girl. Her first canvas was of the mural Kasia had painted in room 6. "It's not just about surviving," she told Lana before leaving. "It's about creating something no one can take away." Kimmy chose to stay. She lived in a small cottage near the edge of the woods. The town's people were kind. Some remembered her name from old prayer lists. Some remembered her mother. She visited the lake every week and left a flower at the wooden sign. She never brought her journal, but she always brought her voice. Sometimes she just spoke aloud to the trees. Names, real ones. Maya returned to her bookstore. But it wasn't just stories she shelved now. She hosted free workshops for youth, quiet spaces for those who didn't have safe homes or even safe memories. Every Friday, she set out tea and read aloud from books the children chose. No one asked about her past, but sometimes during breaks, she'd trace the outline of a certain mural in the back room with her fingers. As for Aaron, he left Morning Lake quietly. No goodbye, no forwarding address. Lana later found a note slipped beneath her office door, "There's more out there. I've heard whispers. Other towns, other kids. I wasn't brave enough then. Maybe I can be now." Taped to the letter was a photo of a bus. Old, rusted, but familiar. On the back, one word, Arcadia. Lana kept the letter in her desk drawer. She didn't open a new case. Not yet. But sometimes at night, when the wind rustled the trees outside her window, she'd think of that name, of the ones they had found and the ones they hadn't. She'd look up at the stars over Morning Lake and wonder how many names had the world forgotten and how many were still waiting for someone like Kimmy or Kasia or Lana to remember them.